self-educating is really important, putting things in perspective, no matter how much or how little. My grandmother, who was an immigrant, had one rule and one rule only, and that was you can always live on 90% of what you make and save the rest. It's so easy. Oh my God. It's so true.
Yeah.
Financial independence,
freedom,
financial picture,
Independent financially,
financial future,
financial freedom and wealth,
financial independence.
Get your fill, financial independence and long life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, financial independence and long life. But I think sometimes money and the idea of money and what do we do with money and how is money going to create happiness for us, or can money, is there any correlation between money and happiness? And once we discover that we have some wealth, we want to become good stewards of that wealth, whether we were born with it or whether it's come to us gradually over time. And that's why I'm very excited to introduce you to Myra Salzer. She is a counselor and advocate for people who have received significant wealth. Myra, thanks so much for being with us today.
Pleasure. What fun. Yes, it's all about fun, isn't it?
It's all that. I mean, for me, yes, absolutely. 100%. It's all about fun. When you think about, like, when people say, oh, no, money's work, like, I don't think you're doing it right. Pretty sure you're not doing it right. So tell me, Myra, how did you become involved helping people to enjoy, maybe, is that the right word? Helping people to deal with, or how would you describe it with
I
their
would
wealth?
say how to integrate with an inheritance, how
Nice.
to make sure that their net worth and self-worths are aligned.
That's beautiful. I really enjoy that way of describing it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And I think a lot of people who don't have wealth of any type, right? And people who are wondering, oh, I wonder if I'm going to need to eat ramen noodles again this month. They just imagine that wealth, that any injection of wealth is just going to bring them a lot of happiness. But that actually does not align after a certain level, right? So what sorts of challenges and roadblocks or obstacles do people encounter when they have significant wealth?
Yeah. So I think there's a real connection between doing something in order to achieve. Well, before I go and answer that question, let's define wealth.
Please.
Because if you go back to the Middle Ages, the original word for wealth is a combination of two words. It's well and health. And there are many different kinds of wealth. There's spiritual wealth and relationship wealth and health wealth and financial wealth and community wealth. And so really, I think when you say wealth, mostly you're talking about financial wealth.
Right.
And I generally talk about relationship wealth and financial wealth, combining the two.
Excellent.
And when someone receives wealth, financial wealth, without ever having done anything for it, there's a disconnect between them and the money. And so in order to be happy, in order to be fulfilled as a result of receiving that wealth, there has to be that grow a connection. And yes, a lot of people think, oh, if I only had money, I wouldn't have these problems. And that may be true. But there may be new problems they have that they didn't even realize. Like all of a sudden they're getting a lot of solicitations, or there are expectations for them to be on boards, or so it's different problems, different opportunities, and a new set of circumstances where they can integrate with their financial wealth.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking, I was thinking about a problem that I would imagine people have when they have great wealth, and that is sincerity. Like, does this person really like me and care about me? Do they want to spend time with me for myself, for me, who I am? Or do they actually just want to meet it, hoping I'm going to give them something, right? And what flashed into my head is a vision, it wasn't a vision, it was an actual thing that I saw in an airport in Italy where There was a guy, I mean, he couldn't have been 5 feet tall, this little tiny guy, at least 80 if he was a day. And this woman, 6 foot, beautiful, statuesque, 20 something, buxom blonde, arm in arm with him. And I thought, I mean, maybe he's a great guy, okay, but perhaps there's, in my mind, there was a correlation between he must be rich. That's just what came into my mind, because why else would they be together? I mean, I suppose she could have been his daughter, but that wasn't the vibe they were giving off.
Yeah.
But is that a thing? Is that something that people struggle with? Sincerity and,
I think it's more difficult or challenging to discern someone's motives.
Yeah.
If you, and I'm saying you as you are the inheritor in this case, if you have not grown into your wealth and built, when you earn wealth yourself, you become confident. And you understand, okay, this is who I am. Whereas if it's just been given to you, that's not who they are yet. That's
Right.
what we do. We, work with our clients and coach our clients so they have a net worth and self-worth that are aligned. And with that confidence, then they are better able to discern someone's motives.
Mhm.
So my circuitous route to get to the answer to your question is yes, there are people who are gold diggers. That's real.
Yeah.
And there are people who are really indifferent and just, you see right through them. The money doesn't matter. They don't care if you take them to McDonald's or to a Michelin star restaurant. It's just they want to go for a walk with you or whatever. So it's a matter of who are you, the inheritor, as a result of their wealth versus who are they and what's their attitude towards wealth.
True.
But
And
there can always be tricky times. Like if you're in a public college and have inherited wealth, you might be the only person who doesn't have student loans or the only one who has their own apartment. And if you want to just fit in, do you share a room with 20 other people? And if they find out that you have inherited wealth, are you expected to pay for dinner? There's just some weird circumstances that come up, especially if someone inherits at a young age.
yeah, it's interesting too that you bring up the idea of dinner. I remember I was at a retreat and the person who was giving the retreat, which we had paid thousands of dollars to attend, brought us out to dinner. And I think I had a feeling around the table that everybody was sort of saying, well, obviously she's going to pay because she's got more money than we do. And I thought, so I paid because I just said, no, that's not the right attitude. That's a real sort of scarcity mindset sort of attitude, right? Like, oh, well, you've got more than me, so you have to take care of that. And I just thought, okay, but I think there is that like unspoken expectation, like so and so has more money, so they should be the ones to. But why should they be the one, right? I mean, if they want to give you that, then that's one thing, but it should not be an expectation because then it's not a gift, right? There's no pleasure in paying for dinner if everybody just expects you to do it. I mean,
If it's a
it's
duty,
robbing you of something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think we have to really understand why your job is, I don't want to say to understand why it's necessary, but to be able to view it from the other side, which is the non, the non silver spoon side, or the person who doesn't have that and doesn't understand why you should why they shouldn't be expected to pay for things. It is just to step back and say, yeah, that was so long-winded. I totally forgot what I was going to say. Uh,
Well, you're talking about the expectation of pain
yeah,
because we have the money, and there are definitely expectations. And rather than stereotyping people who have inherited wealth, I think if the inheritor themselves can teach others to treat them as an individual rather than an inheritor, just like we want to do with all minorities. And I know you're going to say, "Oh, don't pull the minority card on me," but when you think about it, a minority is someone who it has an unusual circumstance. They didn't choose to have that circumstance. There's nothing they could do about it, whether they're Black or they're rich or they're disabled. It's not their choice.
Yeah.
And it sets them apart from others. So inheritors are a minority. And just like many minorities will want to commingle with others like them, there is a tendency for inheritors to want to be around other inheritors because then no one will like them because they have money or no, so they have many minority traits.
And that is limiting, right? In any situation.
Yes.
If you only want to hang out with other people who have wealth, then I don't know, it feels like it limits your exposure to the world. It limits your experiences.
It limits the minority and it limits those in the majority right. Because they don't learn from the minority. They don't understand what it might be like to be in that position.
Yeah, the expectations and the otherness, right? There is an otherness.
I like that term. That's great. Yeah.
Interesting. So, Myra, tell me, how did you become involved in this type of work?
I was a starving fee-only fiduciary financial planner. And a couple made an appointment to come into the office. And this is when I was in an executive suite kind of arrangement. And I was so excited, like, oh boy, a new client. And I wore the blue suit and I rented the conference room and I was ready for their 10 o'clock appointment. And I went into the conference room and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And I was just about to give up when they came in. And I said, well, how can I help you today? And he didn't make any eye contact and looked down at the table and said, the only known source of income I've ever had has just dissipated and I don't know what to do. And I thought, no, this is not what I was hoping for. This is not gonna. And I was really disappointed and noticed that she was playing with her ring and that the stone was on the palm side of her hand. And I don't know much about jewelry, but this was a ring. This was a rock. And I asked about it so I wouldn't have to talk about him not having any income. And she turned it around and there was this enormous emerald. And I said, wow, where did you get it? And she said, at Hurdle's Jewelry. And I said, which was right around the corner from my office. I said, when did you get it? And she said, well, that's why we were late. And I thought, wait a minute, your only known source of income has just dissipated and you probably spent $25,000 on this ring. And she said, no, 60,000. And this is in the late 80s. And I looked at him and I looked at her and like, something's missing here. He goes, oh, I know. I've lived off my trust income all my life. I turned 35 last week. My trust terminated. And now I have $18 million. I don't know what to do with. And she, literally, can we buy a ring like this every day? Or is this a once in a lifetime opportunity? So couldn't relate to what $18 million was. And then she burst into tears. And she said, how can I go home and show my father this ring. He can't even make his mortgage payment. And I thought, whoa, there are things that happen with inherited wealth that they didn't teach us in the College for Financial Planning.
Right.
So, so that actually was a seminal event that we got a workshop for inheritors, a workshop for inheritors that then begot the specialty of working with inheritors.
Fascinating. I think if you are like you are the starving fee-based financial planner, you don't necessarily, right? You think it's so funny because I actually gave a speech on this last night, the correlation, the question, does money buy happiness? And there is that correlation. Like if you are making a certain amount of money, like a five-figure income, for every 20% you add to your income, you get 20% happier, right? But when you reach that plateau, that like, well, it's
The satiation point is what I call it.
exactly when you've attained your, all step one of your Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met. You've got shelter, you've got food, you've got safety. You don't need to worry about anything. And then when you get to that next level, that's kind of where the trouble can start, right? If you have
Well,
18 million and you get 10% more, that's just not going to make you 10% happier. It's just not. And so how do you achieve happiness? How do you find purpose? Especially like people who don't work. I mean, that's a problem like women had for years, right? They're just home taking care of the kids and they begin to have issues with their self-worth. They feel like, oh, I'm just, right? And this, it's a sort of the same kind of thing. There is some value to working and, like you say, earning the money, because every dollar you earn adds to your self-worth, adds to that feeling like I did this. But if someone just hands it to you, and it's so funny because somebody was talking about winning the lottery, and I sort of tried to envision that, like, what would that be like? And I thought, no, I don't want that. That would not make me happy. I mean, sure, I mean, I have fun spending it. And that goes back to all the studies, right? 90 whatever percent of lottery winners have less money at the end of 10 years than they did before they won the lottery. So, I mean, there's just so much wrapped up in this money, which is really just a tool.
Self-worth.
But
You are going to find a way to have your financial resources match your self-worth, your confidence, your ego.
exactly.
And yes, money doesn't make you happy, but nor does poverty.
Right.
And so I think there is a happy medium, and you touched on that with talking about the satiation point. And after you get to that, once you're sated in terms of all your wants and needs, then it becomes kind of a burden because you have to deal with the legacy. How do you give it away? To whom? Doing it responsibly? Minimizing your taxes. These are rich people's problems, right?
Right.
And that does not bring happiness unless that legacy is aligned with the purpose. And that's what we do, is we help clients understand or figure out what their purpose is and how to get there, and how to have that sense of real satisfaction with leaving the assets or giving it away or whatever. Most of our clients are way beyond this being sated.
Yeah. But that sounds more like life coaching than financial planning.
Yeah, we do. We have a life coach on staff, and she also is a CFP. And so we have two branches. We have wealth coaching and investment management and financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
And we work hand in hand because we're fiduciaries, because we charge flat fees. We don't have any incentive to bring assets under management, but
Right.
we look at everybody's assets that are being managed. If they're aligned with the client, great. If they're charging too much, we'll alleviate that. We can do what the client wants without any incentive to bring the assets over and charge based on that. So, yeah, we do it all. It's a one-stop shop. We don't have attorneys on staff and we don't have accountants on staff. Most of our clients are national and they have their own attorneys already and own accountants already. And the attorneys, of course, have to work in their state.
And so how does the process work? So I've inherited wealth, I've come into age, whatever, and now I have that sort of empty feeling. And how do I find you? And then how does the process work when we start to work together and we start to get to know each other and you discover, how do you discover what it is that's going to give me that feeling of fulfillment and confidence?
Right. So often it starts with an 8-week session, not 8 weeks, but 8-session program called Way into Wealth. And it's a one-on-one remote 8 hours with the wealth coach, Melissa Hoyer. So that with that course, a client or potential client can discover what is their relationship with wealth? Where are they on the spectrum? Where are they in the stages of inherited wealth? Because if they haven't gone to the learning growing stage yet, and they're still at the innocent stage or the denial stage, we can't really help them yet. But once they get to the learning growing stage, then we can bring them into the ignorant acceptance and the integrated authority. And once they're an integrated authority, then they can delegate the parts of wealth management that they don't like. That 8-week or 8-session program, Way into Wealth, is a way for them to understand where they are on that continuum and how to get to where they want to be. What is their relationship with wealth now, and how to get to where they want to be a year from now or 5 years from now. Sometimes we can help, sometimes they can do it on their own.
And how about, so is it only inherited wealth? Because I'm also thinking about people who suffer from imposter syndrome, say a celebrity or a professional sports person or something like that who started out with nothing and now they find themselves in a situation where they have all this money and they don't really feel like they earned it because they're just doing things that they love. Is there any of that in your practice?
Yeah, good question. I like that. Even a sports figure who is making millions of millions and at a young age, but is doing something for that compensation. It's quite different than an inheritance. Usually an inheritance, there's a familial connection. And there might be siblings or cousins who have exactly the same. So there is some connection within and within the family. Whereas a sports figure, an actor, a famous author who makes it, they're number one, they're public. Everyone knows about them. And number two, they're an anomaly within the family. So it shifts their relationship with their family members, and they can become the patriarch even if they're 22 years old. So it is different. We can work with them, but it's not our specialty. They aren't beneficiaries of trust that we can analyze. And we don't negotiate deals. We're not agents. And most agents do try to also do the investment management and financial management and planning. So it's not what we specialize in.
Interesting. Do you see a lot of, I mean, certainly in the lower echelons of our world, money brings out the worst in people. Do you sometimes find that as well, with family drama and resentment, and that there's some things to navigate there as like maybe I'm just thinking of a situation where the money is coming from a trust, from your parent, for example, and you don't like that person, you resent them, or you don't dislike them, or there's some um,
Oh, yeah. Many years ago, we had a client who was estranged from her uncle who died intestate, which is without a will. And she was the only living family member. And that was because 2 weeks before this uncle died, her brother died of AIDS. So she was the sole beneficiary, not because the uncle wanted that, but because he died without a will, and that's where the money went. And she had no idea how much he had. It was a lot. And her brother died, or he would have gotten half. And so she felt
yeah,
guilty. I mean, it was just it. She was not happy about receiving this totally unexpected financial windfall.
yeah. And there are a lot of emotion there, a lot of sadness, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And like you
And
say,
within a
guilt.
year, she was divorced, and I mean, it just it didn't end well. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the question that I was getting to, right? It is when there are, because there has to be some emotion, some entanglement, or some um, like in that case, it wasn't her money, it was her uncle's money, and she didn't even realize what was happening. And I suppose the answer that the thing that's going through people's minds now is, well, if you have money, isn't it just easy enough to get rid of it if it's bothering you so much, right? Right? Everybody says, "Oh, I'll put my hand up, right? You can give it to me if you don't like it." So, is giving and donating and perhaps some type of a trust for something that is important to them, is that part of that? Perhaps
It's
part
part
of
of the coaching we do, absolutely, in the financial planning, but you can't just give money away. There are 2 tax codes in the United States. There's an income tax code, which everybody knows about. Every year they have income, they have to pay income tax. And there's a transfer tax code. It's gifts and estates. Every time they transfer assets, they have to file a transfer tax return. And most people don't ever have to think about that. But if you've inherited a lot of money that you don't want anything to do with, you have to think about it.
So you're paying to give the money away, essentially, or is it the recipient?
It depends on who the recipient is and how, but you don't get to give, even if you have a charity you want to give all of it to, and it's a qualified 501(c)(3) and everything's good, you can't deduct it indiscriminately. There are limits to what you can deduct and
Right.
how you can carry it forward on your income tax return. And if you don't have much in the way of income, there's not much of a benefit.
Right. That's true. That's true. Except that great feeling. Right. And that is that,
If
right?
it's given out of guilt, there's no great feeling that comes with it.
No, absolutely not. I'm thinking of another study that I was looking at for the speech that I gave last night, and that's where they gave $5. They had 3 groups of people, and they gave them each $5. And one group had to keep the money, or I should say, one group got to keep the money. One group got to spend the money, had to go spend it on themselves, and the third group had to give it away anonymously. And by far, that group reported the highest level of
I
happiness.
love that.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
And it is like, just think about that. Like, oh, I've got to like sneakily give this person a gift, and right, how fun that is, how fun and interesting that is. So there are ways, I think, to enjoy and revel in the sharing of your wealth, but
There,
obviously it has to
and
make
it doesn't have to
good tax
be
sense.
huge amounts of money.
Sorry.
I started at the car wash where there's a cup for, the tips and everything. And I just started putting $100 bill in there, knowing that they'd never know who it was.
Right.
And they'd come across it and it would just be such a, and I just thinking about that, it was like, oh, what fun.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There is that component, and that's where I think some of the joy of wealth can come from, right? Is
Abs-
is uh is just kind of like sneakily thinking, oh, what it's going to be like when that person opens this thing or finds, dumps out the cup and expecting to have, 7 quarters in there, and all of a sudden there's $100 bill and everybody's jumping for joy, right? And that's in some, that's not obviously life-changing money, but it certainly could change their evening, their prospects for the evening.
and here's what a gift is. If it makes a difference in their life. So if you give a billionaire $1 million, nothing.
Nothing.
If you give a homeless person $100, it makes a difference. If you give a high school graduate $1,000 for graduating, that makes a difference.
And that's where the fun is.
That's another thing our clients ask us to do periodically, is to help them give to a certain cause or a certain organization anonymously. And we do that through the Wealth Conservancy so that the recipient never knows who the actual donor was. It's fun.
There's a
Yeah.
guy in the town where my mom lives, and I happen to know who he is, but most people, he does everything anonymously. And one of the things he does is he pays for the fireworks for this block party that they have in town. And I can just imagine, like, sitting and thinking, listening to all the oohs and ahs of the fireworks, and knowing that the whole town is really enjoying themselves, and how much fun that would be.
Great. I love that story.
So what's the most fun part of your job?
I think giving, everybody wants freedom. That's really a goal of everybody's.
Yeah.
And when you've been given a lot of money, a lot of your freedom's been taken away. There's a tremendous responsibility that goes hand in hand with it. And so the greatest joy I get, I am getting around to your question, is that when I can simplify and free our clients up so that they aren't talking to their advisors, talking to their attorneys, or accounting themselves, or doing the research on which philanthropic organizations to give to or how much or whatever. But they have a life, they can travel, they can do whatever, and have confidence that everything's getting taken care of. That's my joy.
Yeah. And what do you think is the most challenging part of your job?
Mm. Um, a well, how someone gives money to their heirs can profoundly affect their connection to it. And I have clients like this, where they've been given many entities. I mean, 50, 75, 100 entities with different managing partners that they have no control over, that they have no control over what their income is. Some of them don't even spew out enough cash to pay taxes, income taxes, and they're all pass-through entities. And what kind of gift is that? And so on paper, they might be worth $100 million, but can they spend 50,000 this month? Really, seriously, it's that dramatic. And so I think the most challenging thing is to understand, first, for us to understand what they own, because every entity is different and doing something different, and has a different goal and a different managing member and a different, and what the intent is of that entity, and then teach her, and then how does she deal with her kids with, this is all she knows. How
Right.
can she do it differently? So it's breaking that family pattern. That's also a huge challenge too, so it doesn't propagate.
And that's a tall order.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Myra, do you think that any of the things, just sort of to bring us back to the every person, the every woman scenario, is there anything that you think that you've learned or that you teach your clients that pretty much anybody could benefit from? That, you know, people who are just now discovering wealth of their own, like that they could perhaps benefit from, maybe even some of the mistakes that you see your clients making?
Self-educating is really important, putting things in perspective, no matter how much or how little. My grandmother, who was an immigrant, had one rule and one rule only, and that was you can always live on 90% of what you make and save the rest. It's so easy. Oh my God. It's so true.
Yeah. And that lesson is over and over again, right? The Richest Man in Babylon. There a lot of books that you would pick up that have to do with financial management are going to tell you just take $1 for every 10 that you make and put it away, and just don't think about it anymore. Put it away, and all kinds of great things come from there. That's excellent. Thank you to your grandmother.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Anything that you wish I would have asked you? Anything that you feel is important for people to step away with?
I think if you are an heir, know that there are resources out there for you. And if you're not, but you know one, be with that person, not with their money.
Very nice.
And there are resources. So that's my message.
Excellent. That's really nice. And Mara, if people are listening to this and they feel like, oh my gosh, I need to speak to this person, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, definitely wayintowealth.com for the 8-session program. thewealthconservancy.com for the financial planning wealth coaching firm. If they want to learn more, they can Google my name, Myra Salzer, and wealth prejudice, and hear my TEDx talk on the challenges of inherited wealth. They're not alone.
Excellent. And we'll put all those links in the show notes for you. Myra, thank you so much for being with us today. I enjoyed our conversation. I'm sorry, there's little kids talking in the hall. I hope you can't hear them too much. But yes, we really appreciate you. And listeners, even if you don't right this minute know of somebody who has inherited wealth who could benefit from this, please think about that. Please keep that in mind. And when you meet somebody in your travels who you know has more than you do, don't automatically assume that that means they need to pay for dinner, right? Try to think of yourself as an equal, because from a mindset perspective, it's a good thing to do for you, and it's a nice thing to do for them as well, so that you can try to at least get to know and appreciate people for who they truly are, regardless of what their balance sheet may say.
Christine, thanks for being such a great listener. You get it.
Mara, you're fantastic. I really appreciate you.
Thank
And
you.
we appreciate you, listeners. Have a beautiful day.